Hello again and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com, and in today's video I want to give you a general introduction to the reading section of the TOEFL. Today I'm going to start by talking about how the reading section actually works. I'm going to describe the topics of the articles you might get. I'm going to talk about the various question types used in the reading section, and at the end of the video, I'll give you a little bit of advice about how to use your time properly and how to get started as you begin preparing for the reading section. Now, please note that this is just a general introduction, so I'm not putting in a lot of sample questions and articles. If you do want to get some of those, check out the article I've linked to in the video description down below. That includes a complete sample article and a complete set of sample questions. All right, so how does the reading section of the TOEFL actually work? Well, please know that you will read 3 or 4 articles. If you get 4 articles though, one of them will not be graded. Of course, you have no way of knowing which one will not be graded, so you have to do your best on every single question. This article that's not graded is what ETS refers to as an experimental reading passage. You're going to answer 9 or 10 questions per article. Now this is usually 10, almost always 10, but in certain cases you could get an article that has just 9 questions. I'll talk about that in just a moment. You're going to be given 54 minutes or 72 minutes to read all of the articles and answer all of the questions. Now, you can use this time however you like. What I mean is you could take like 25 minutes to deal with the first article and then just 10 minutes to deal with the second article or whatever. I mean, generally I suggest that you use the same amount of time for every article, but it is up to you. You're free to use the time however you like. You're also free to go backwards and forwards between all the questions and all the articles as long as you have time left. What this means is that if you're really confused by a question, you can just take a guess and then come back to it later. That's something that a lot of students actually don't know, so I mention it here so you can remember that on test day. Let's talk about these articles. On the left-hand side of the screen, I've listed some of the most common topics that appear in the reading section of the TOEFL. These are not the only topics you could get, but they are the most common topics, and they're ones that come up a lot if you look in the official practice tests published by ETS. Now, these articles are generally between 650 and 750 words, usually about 5 or 6 paragraphs. You're generally getting between 20 and 27 words per sentence. Now, I mention this only to remind you that these are fairly challenging articles. They have fairly long and complicated sentences. You should be studying for this section right away. Basically, they are college-level texts. They use challenging vocabulary. There's going to be words that you've never seen before. So as I said, start studying right away. Okay, so how about the questions? Well, here on the left-hand side of the screen are the various question types. Let's start by looking at the first 8. These are all multiple choice, so you're picking an answer from among 4 choices. One of the most common types is called the factual information type, and you might get between 1 and 3 of these per article. They're very common. These questions require you to identify a detail which is actually mentioned in the article. So you get 4 to choose from, and you have to pick the one which is actually in the article. On the other hand, another type is called the negative factual information type. You might get 1 or 2 of these per article. In this type, you're given 4 details to choose from, and you have to pick one that is not in the article. That's a bit more challenging, I think. Another very common type is the vocabulary type. You might get between 1 and 3 of these on the test, or more or less. This is just, what happens generally on the TOEFL. In the vocabulary type, you're given a word from the article, and you have to pick another word from the choices, which means the same thing. A less common type is the rhetorical purpose type. This is a question where the question mentions some detail or word from the article, and you have to say why the author mentioned that detail in the article. The sentence simplification type, again, is fairly uncommon. You might only get one of them on the test or none. In this type, you're given a sentence from the article, and you have to pick another sentence which basically says the same thing. This is pretty much a paraphrasing exercise. Another fairly uncommon type is the inference type. You might get one of these per article, or maybe you might get an article with none of them. This is where you have to identify an argument or idea that is not specifically stated in the article, but it is heavily implied. Another fairly infrequent type, which you might get none or one per article, is the reference type. This question type asks you to identify what the author refers to when he says it or this or something like that. Now, the last of these multiple choice type questions is the insert a sentence type. In this type, the question gives you a complete sentence, and then it tells you to insert it into one of the paragraphs, and it gives you 4 possible places to add it to that paragraph. You have to pick the spot where it fits best. Now, for these 8 types of questions, the answer is contained in a single paragraph, and you are almost always told which paragraph to check. These are all worth 1 point. And then the final question in each article is either a summary or a fill in a table type. In the summary type, you're given 6 or 7 complete sentences, and you have to pick 3 of those which represent the main ideas of the article. The other sentences represent minor ideas or supporting details, or they represent things that aren't actually in the article. That one's worth 2 points. The last question type, which is very, very uncommon these days, but still shows up now and again, is called the fill in a table type. This is like a categorization question. Like if the article is about animals with 2 legs and animals with 4 legs, the question will give you like 7 animals. And you'll have to categorize them either as animals with 2 legs or animals with 3 legs, or 4 legs, I should say. And that one is worth 3 points. And for these last 2 question types, you have to use the whole article to get the answers. So yeah, that makes them a little bit more challenging. Now, as far as getting 9 questions, well, if you have a summary question at the end, that means you're going to get 9 of these single point questions. If, on the other hand, you have a fill in the table question at the end, you're going to get 8 of these single point questions. So that means that the whole article is worth 11 points, no matter what. Now, that means the whole reading section has 33 points. This is called the raw score, and this is converted to 30 points on your score report, which is called the scaled score. I'm going to talk about that conversion more in just a moment, but before we move on, I do want to mention that you should always be prepared for surprise questions. Like, I know I've given you all this information and I sound really confident, but always be prepared for something I haven't mentioned here. It could happen. And if that happens to you, well, good luck. I don't know what to say. Just don't panic. Do your best. All right, let's get back to the score conversions. Here is a chart of how I think the scores are converted. As you can see, if you get 32 points in the raw score, that usually converts to 29 points on the actual score report. If you get 25 points on the raw score, that generally converts to 23 points on the score report. Now, this is just an estimate. It's just based on math. There's nothing fancy that went into this. I have to mention that I created this chart. The actual conversion is an ETS secret. They will not give you a chart like this. And I think the reason for that is that the conversion might be different every single time the test is given to compensate for the difficulty level of each individual test. What I mean is, if the test is really, really hard one day, then they'll be more generous with the conversion. Like maybe you could still get 30 points even if you made one mistake. On the other hand, if the test is really, really easy and everyone does really good, then the conversion is less generous. And if you want to get a perfect 30 on your score report, you can't make any mistakes. All right, so now we've talked about the articles and the questions and the scoring. I want to give you a little bit of basic advice on how to actually master this section. Here's what I recommend. First of all, I do recommend reading the articles. Read them really quickly. Now, some teachers recommend that you don't read the articles whatsoever, that you just go right to the questions. I generally don't recommend that. I think that spending about 2 minutes to read each article will improve your comprehension, and I think it'll make it easier to answer the questions, especially those summary and fill in a table questions. In any case, this is something you're going to want to experiment with as you do practice tests. Just try spending 2 minutes, see how your answers look. Next time, spend 1 minute or 3 minutes and see how many answers you get right. And just try doing a test where you don't read the articles and you just get right to the questions. See how that affects your score. Just do what's best for you. Anyways, in my case, if I spend 2 minutes reading each article, I'm left with 1 minute and 36 seconds per question. But it is important to keep in mind that vocabulary questions are done really quickly. It's usually you know it or you don't know it. So you're not going to spend the whole 1:36 on a vocabulary question. And reference questions are pretty similar too. If you're just looking for the meaning of it or this, you're only going to read 1 or 2 sentences. So again, you don't need the whole 1:36 for a reference question. On the other hand, the negative factual questions require you to read a ton of sentences, like the whole paragraph, to pick out whatever's not mentioned. So you're going to need more than 1:36. Likewise, the summary and table questions use the whole article, so they'll take a little bit longer. What does this mean then? Well, first of all, don't try to memorize some timing formula for each question type. That's just going to make it too complicated and you're going to panic and get confused. There's just 2 things to keep in mind instead. First of all, spend less than 1 minute on vocabulary and reference questions, and spend less than 2 minutes on everything else. And if you get really overwhelmed by a question, just abandon it. Take a guess and make a note of which number it is so you can quickly go back and try again if you have extra time at the end. Don't get bogged down by a single question or some confusing sentence that you can't figure out. If it's been 2 minutes and you're still overwhelmed, frankly, you're probably not going to get it and you've just been wasting your time. So move on if you have to. It sucks, but sometimes you have to do it. What about your general preparations? Well, this is the advice I give to everyone. First of all, you need to practice as much as humanly possible. You need to get as many good sample tests as possible, and you need to do all of them. Every single one you can get your hands on. You need to identify your weaknesses and strengths. Like, you need to figure out, maybe you are really terrible at inference questions. You should know that well in advance of taking the test. If you know you are really terrible at these inference questions, you'll know not to waste your time on test day. Likewise, if you find out that you're really good at history articles, it might be worth giving yourself a bit of extra time on test day so that you can maximize the score you get from them. Like, focusing on a history article might be a really good use of your time. Now, if you have a long time to prepare, like 6 months or more, you should also be doing some academic reading practice. And by this, I just mean good nonfiction books or articles from things like National Geographic or Scientific American. That will really improve your vocabulary and your comfort level with academic reading. Next up, you should really study what's called the academic word list. And this is a list of like the 500 most common words in academic writing. And surprisingly, those words, like 500 of them, they make up about 8% of everything in the TOEFL reading articles. That's a lot. So if you totally know these words, your comprehension of the articles will increase quite a lot. So I'm going to put a link to those down below in the comments as well. Final thing I want to mention, TOEFL reading strategies are slow. Generally, I don't like TOEFL reading strategies. Your overall goal here is to simply comprehend the articles so that you can answer the questions without using any tips or tricks or special techniques. Use strategies if you have to, but your ultimate goal must be comprehension. All right, so what should you use to prepare? Well, for those practice tests, you have a few sources. First of all, the official guide to the TOEFL is a book published by ETS, which contains 4 complete practice tests plus 2 more reading sets. So that's good for like 6 tests right there. You can also get the 2 official IBT tests books, that's volume 1 and volume 2, which combine for 10 total tests. The official practice PDF is free from ETS on their website, as is the ETS official practice test, which is also free. I tell all of my students, if you have not done all 18 of these tests, you are not ready for the TOEFL. You really need to get your hands on these. Yeah, the first 2 you might have to buy, or maybe you can find them somewhere else, if you know what I mean. And you should work through those. Those are 18 of them. Do 1 per week if you have 18 weeks. Do 2 per week. You know what I mean. Work through all of those. All right, that's all I want to say about the reading section in general, but please subscribe to the channel so you can get my individual videos about each of the question types as soon as they are ready. And if you have any questions, of course, leave a comment down below. I answer the questions as soon as humanly possible every day. And if you want to find more of the kind of stuff that I do, check out TOEFLresources.com. That's my website where you can find guides to the reading section and the speaking section, and you can find my sample essays, and you can sign up for my essay and speaking evaluation services, which I think are pretty cool. All right, I'm going to leave it at that, but I will see you all again really soon. Take care till then, guys.